Presence, the podcast for everyone interested in bodywork, embodiment, and somatic practices. I'm Andrew Rosenstock, your host and guide on this enlightening journey. With my expertise as a somatic movement therapist, yoga therapist, and certified Rolfer, I'll merge clinical insight with real-world experience to enrich our discussions with our guests. Through engaging and informative talks, this podcast delves into mind-body paradigms, offering insights and strategies to empower personal growth. Your support is vital for our grassroots and lo-fi production. If you connect with our content, please leave a positive review and subscribe on your preferred platform. Your engagement helps us reach a broader audience and supports our mission. So thanks for tuning in today to Touching into Presence. Fasten your seatbelt as we embark on a journey to explore the transformative power of contemplative and somatic practices together. It was a pleasure to be in conversation today with Pierpaola Volpones. Pierpaola graduated as a physical educator in 1976 and in sociology in 1982. She taught physical education in public schools and applied kinesis therapy in private centers for more than 10 years. After having attended a Rolf Movement Workshop, she started her Rolfing education. She certified first as a Rolf Movement Practitioner in 1986 and then as a Rolfer in 1988. In 1996, she became a Certified Advanced Rolfer. Since 1986, she runs her practice in Italy as a full-time profession. In 2006, the Rolf Institute certified Pierpaola as an international Rolfing and Rolf Movement instructor. Outside of Rolfing, Pierpaola has continued to deepen her studies in visceral manipulation and somatic experiencing. In today's talk, Andrew and Pierpaola discussed Pierpaola's journey in Rolfing movement, her teaching style, and the importance of cross-cultural communication. We also touched upon the challenges and responsibilities of teacher training, the significance of adaptability and finding alternative approaches, and the concept of tonic function. Our conversation emphasized the importance of self-awareness, understanding personal space, and proximity in client interactions. The conversation emphasized the importance of self-awareness, understanding personal space, and proximity in client interactions. There's a whole lot more that we go into. For me, I was very happy to have this talk, as Pierpaola has been one of the teachers who really influenced me along my path. I really enjoyed classes with her and time with her, and just really respect her as a human being. And so I wanted to share her and get more people to become familiar with her and what she offers. So anyways, enough of my intro, and let's get into the talk. It's nice to see you again, and I'm looking forward to our talk. So yeah, for me, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is I just really adore you as a person, but also as a teacher, I really enjoyed being in your classroom and how you share, how you teach, and how you share your work, your approach to the work, and then also how you embody it. And this is one of the things. I was speaking to some people in this class about Rolf movement and how some people can precisely speak about it, but don't embody it. Other people can very much embody it, but can't really speak about it. And you I find, are able to do both very, very well. And so I wanted to share you with other people, and then also hopefully other people can study with you, but to also learn some stuff here.
That's nice to hear. I mean, I feel a bit shy. And well, and in the same time, I do feel quite happy because, the message that I'm having inside myself, when I hear you saying that, it means that it's coming out in the way, it's real for me, in authentic. So it's good, there's a coherency with what I'm thinking and how I do approach my way to teach people, which is not just to instruct or feel or, make them fuller in many different ways, which is also to make contact with themselves, basically.
Yeah. And something I guess I should say, if it wasn't clear for people listening, is that while you're fluent in English, it is a second language for you. And so sometimes some of the words, or maybe even be a third language for you, or fourth. So some of the words will sometimes, may take time or maybe slightly different than, because we're communicating across different barriers. But that being said, you're also perfectly fluent enough.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you for being patient.
I mean, it's one of the things also that I hope to get into a bit. Is one of the things I loved about being in class with you is a lot of Americans, because I took your class, for those who don't know, in the Rolf Institute in Boulder, and a lot of Americans don't travel, which is fine. It's not a people who travel are better than not. It's just different experiences. But one of the things that I found in my experiences through travel was how cross-cultural communication, expression is really important for what we're doing here. And I really appreciated that the Rolf Institute was bringing non-American teachers to an American place, because I think that there's so much richness that can come out of that in relation to our work. And so, maybe we'll get into that in some way, but maybe just start by talking a bit about Pierpaola, how you came to be the person I'm speaking to right now.
Yeah. Well, also, let me just say one thing about this international gathering and mix. Actually, we are almost the same, but we also are very, very different from each other. So, I mean, culture, location, geography, everything, it makes a difference in the way we are and the way we move. I mean, I'm Italian, so you don't see me, but I had to use my hands to talk, right? And it's true, I need to see, with my hands what I'm saying, for example. And that might look strange to somebody, or, funny or whatever. And for me, maybe it would look strange to see people not using the hands, or even putting the hands under the laps, for example. No, but and all these differences, we can see them as bringing people apart or richness. And I'm one of those who thinks the differences are richness. So I really love to meet, other way of thinking, or other ways to eat, for example, or to behave, or to walk, or to dress, or all that. For me, differences are really richness. So I'm not scared of differences, for example. Actually, just the opposite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, similar. I had the benefit of basically starting my bodywork career being in other countries, and being in places where there's a lot of mixed people, and getting to work on a Norwegian and then later work on an Italian. And yes, we're all humans, but there were different ways of how their bodies were carrying, part of it, I think, through the social constructs, part of it through the language, part of it through various things. And while at the root of it, and that's part of the point of even this whole talk, is that we're all human, there were slight differences that made us unique and were wonderful. And if we're going to be working with someone, getting a sense of the culture that they grew up in, which is even like you mentioned Italy and using your hands. Well, one thing that I learned is that generally the hand using is more from Southern Italy, and the Northerners don't use it so much, right? So even in Italy, you have different microcultures that are somewhat different.
Absolutely. It's a long land. So we have 1,000 kilometers from the very north to the very south. So we are very different. Actually, I live more or less in the center. So I'm using my hands. So it's half and half. How do I get to rolling? Well, I come from, I studied physical education at the university. And I have to say that, I never was happy with that. But I also was never happy because also I wasn't happy in my body. And strange enough, I was studying physical education because, many familiar reasons, I want to do something that was allowing me to work and earn money. And so, be independent from and not be a burden for my family, actually from my mom at the moment. But, I really never was an athlete, for example. I never was a dancer. I never was. So me and my body were really two different beings, very far from each other. But then something happened that was really making a big shift. And what happened was that I started to practice a kind of body theater. So there was the time where, was, street theater, mime, or using the body as an instrument, using the voice as an instrument. So, and I was having so much fun and joy. And there was a group of people working together. So we were participating to workshops and seminars and working hard with the body. But the work was aiming for an expression at the end, So that was the very first moment I started to feel happy in my body and to know it, basically. Really to know it, and also to feel the joy of being in that flesh. So I was still, working in school and teaching gymnastics, to the kids, and I was starting to be less shy in with myself. Strange enough, I was really, even not easy with wearing the jumpers, or for example, when I was a kid, we had to wear shorts to go to the gym. And I hate to be in my shorts, I hate to see my legs, naked, for example. But, the experience with the theater and the group, my friends, we were really, having a little bit of a crazy time, if you want, but was liberating somehow. So that was the first time, was, starting to find myself, meet myself on a deeper place. So then there was the work, and it was teaching in the swimming pool to the kids to learn to swim. And so again, I was okay to be in my, what's the word, swimming dress, But then, there was a little girl, 2 years old, and she was completely hypothonic, so she wasn't able to stand or sit, with some neurological problems, autistic traits also. And the parents, they were bringing the girl to do some movement, to do some action. So in the pool, the swimming pool. So I'm also somebody who would never say no to challenges. And so I said, okay, let me try. Let's see. And what I was doing with this little girl was to move her. So, and using the water, so the resistance of the water, and moving her legs and feet, and, you moving the body, mainly touching her a lot and hugging her, having her in my hands. And after some time, maybe, 8-10 times that she was coming to the pool, she was starting to look at me. So make eye contact and start to play with the water with the hands. So instead of, from nowhere, she was starting to be somewhere in the pool, for example, with me. And, the moment I'm telling you this, still I feel this excitement, still I feel even a little bit, moved and touched. Just to see, that I was asking myself, what am I doing with her? I'm not doing any therapy. I'm just touching her and hugging her and liking her. So I went to a friend and I told him this story, and I said, I want to learn something where I can use my hands, because, what happened with this little girl is quite, fantastic. I mean, just bringing her from the fog of the universe she's living and start to make contact with another, universe. So, and he was, suggesting different classes and different trainings. And then he said, there would be a Rolf Movement training in my, workshop in my center. He was only in a center, bodywork center. I said, oh, what is it? And he said, well, I don't know. I never heard about before. But somebody introduced me the teacher. And the teacher was Leonor Varela. And I said, okay, I signed. So just trusting him and I don't know, maybe my intuition. I said, okay, try it. And it was a 4-day workshop, 5-day workshop. It was long ago in 1983, I believe. And that was really inspiring to me, to move in that way, to feel my body in that way, so subtle, but in the same time, so intense and deep. Tiny little movements and different way to relate to each other. And all this micro movement that was making a big difference on many levels, including energy, For example, it was winter and was, normally I'm quite cold and use several layers, scarves, etc. And I was so hot, I was just going around with the shirt. I was hot. And I said, well, it's the work, something is really releasing on a very fundamental level here. And something is starting to flow, on a very, unexpected and totally unconscious, out of control level. But in the same time, there was no being out for lunch, was really on my feet and really present and really awake. So she said, Paula, I think you should learn this thing, this method. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about, but I like what I'm experiencing. So I went I want to read the books from Ida Rolf. And, at that time, there was no Amazon. So to get the books from US was like a nightmare. Actually, I ordered through a library in Bologna, which was an international library. There is a big university in Bologna. But I never made it, so I never got the books. So I was studying from photocopies of a book that somebody else, in Italy was, he just became a Rolfer, and he gave me the book and I made copies. So of the two books, Ida Rolf and Rosemary's Fights. And then I said, yes, I want to learn that. I really like the approach this woman is giving to the body. And I went to know it. And that was it. So I did my movement training first. That was a long training, like the Rolfing training. And then that was in 86. And in 88, I did my Rolfing training, took my Rolfing training. I just, invest all my reserves, in my education.
And in 86, the Rolfing training was the movement was in Europe, but the training was in the US?
No, the training also was in Europe. There was Stacy Mills coming and Michael Salvezon for the practitioner. Yeah, there was an office, not even an office. There was a person organizing the classes. Yeah, in Munich, in Germany.
Yeah. And then so from there, because at some point you became a teacher, but what did you do after that point?
After the training?
After the training, yeah.
Well, after the movement training, I was keeping my job as a teacher in school, because, I was the first Rolf Movement Practitioner. Actually, we were called teachers, Rolf Movement teachers in Italy. There was just me and maybe 7-8 Rolfers. And so no one knew about Rolfing and no one absolutely knew about Rolf movement. But I was, giving talks and practicing and working in different cities and giving groups, et cetera, et cetera. But then when I started after the Rolfing training in 88, I just decided I want to be a Rolfer. That's it. So I quit all the other jobs. And again, I was working in 3 cities. And so altogether, I was able to give like 10, 12 sessions per week, which was, for in the beginning was good. But that was it. So I kept practicing, and I was working and never bored, of work, never. And then before 2000, I started to assist to start the teacher training. And that was very interesting to, first of all, to ask myself, why do I want to be a teacher? Because I never was happy to be a teacher in the other context. And what am I bringing here? Who are the students for me? Or am I allowed, or am I legitimate, to be able to transfer all this lineage, of Rolfing, I found it really challenging and also a big responsibility, And so there was a lot of questions, about myself, but also about Rolfing. So also assisting teachers and then see how they were presenting the work and how they were working and how they were behaving with the students and how to, there was one teacher and he asked me, you had to find out why you want to be a teacher. And then I thought, I thought for a really long time. I said, I don't know, but I had to stay with this question.
Yeah, it's a great question that it's a little later on. I want to go into a little more, but it's a great question.
Yeah. So there were these two things. One was, how can I honor, all the work from Ida Rolf and, so I learned from my teachers, and what's the best way to teach them to these people and to do something which I love, basically. So, well, actually, that was one thing that convinced me. And the thing was that, I'm teaching what I'm doing in my practice. So I'm doing Rolfing. I'm still, working with the 10 sessions still, for example, So even if, I am advanced, I'm an even advanced instructor, but still, I feel and I see, and I can see the value of, the basic 10 sessions. So, because if I don't do it, how can I teach them, If I think that the basic 10 are basic, but there is more to come, how can I teach them? I mean, what could be the message which is transferred, So I'm teaching something which is not the real thing, but, with advanced, it become the real thing. So I think it's two completely different layers. So we could be advanced even when we give a first hour.
Oh, yeah. I have a separate running talk that may become part of the podcast with a few Rolfers about what does it mean to be advanced? And also, are there better ways to teach what we're doing? And one of the things I actually said, I think aligns with what you were saying is, if a basic step is needed to get advanced, even if once you get to advanced, you kind of see, oh, well, we don't need that basic step anymore. But it is needed because it's needed to get to that point where you no longer need it. And so there may not be a better way to actually do it, even though in future sight, you can say, oh, I see this other way now. And it's, yeah, but you needed that way, which is limited in its own way. But that's where the paradigm can shift from. And so this is a point of debate between a few other Rolfers and me.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. It's very interesting because it also shows where we are as practitioners, as teachers, as persons also. And well, as you said, to me, knowing Rolfing and being a Rolfer in always has to do with how do I deal with gravity? How do I behave? How is it really gravity traveling through me? And not to be aligned or straight or, perfect. I'm not completely, but I'm in this context, and I'm, always referring to this relationship with the outer and the inner world, which is, based on those parameters. Yeah.
The why to be a teacher is interesting for me because right now, I don't want to be a teacher. I think in the future, I do. I really want to be a teaching assistant. And the reason I want to be a teaching assistant is to be a bridge of sorts of this intermediary, which is teaching in a way. But I also found that some of the teaching assistants, so in the Rolf Institute context, in order to be a teacher, you need to be a teaching assistant. And then if you sort of questioned some of the teaching assistants why they want to be a teacher, not all, but some I would find is because of ego and insecurity, which is in everything. It's not just in Rolfing.
Yeah.
and not that I don't have that, but I want to come to a place not from that, but from a different place of real just of being support, of not needing to go to that next level and be a teacher and be seen, but just to be the person in the back. In the workshop I did this weekend, there was a lady who she did all the organization. She got no credit for it. She was in the background, and I sent her a message the day afterwards saying, thank you for all the little things. You know, she always had oranges and little nuts. And it was in the background, but it allowed for the whole container to be a more rich container. And for right now, that's where I'm interested in going. The why to be a teacher. I don't hear it with you, but I definitely do find with the summit is this. It's an irony to me, because for me, so much of this work is about getting out of a place of insecurity and getting to a more place of comfort, even in discomfort. And yet, you know, here we have that split of sorts.
Yeah. So it's very true what you said, that for me, in the ego, for example, so for me, what I'm teaching is more important than me teaching. Mm-hmm. So, of course, you know, my personality or my style can be more, you know, an easy bridge, or, you know, create more easy pathway or more resistance. Huh? Mm-hmm. What I'm teaching is more important than me. So I'm not interested to be, you know, to show up, to be on stage, or, you know, to show how good I am or how whatever. And I'm more interested in how the students learn. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, and that's very just as I've taken class with you, that's very I really appreciate how you're open to learning from the students. Yeah. You know, that was very clear that you hold the power structure of the teacher, but the container you allow, which I would say is, I'm sure, how you approach the work, which for me is also how I approach the work. I don't know any better than my clients. I know different, and how can I meet them, and what can I learn from them? Yeah.
And, you know, I tend to think that if, you know, what I'm teaching is not coming through, is because I'm not using the right channel for that with that person, for example. Right. Maybe it's good. There's two people, but not with the other one. So, and I think also to watch how my son went through school, for example, was also quite interesting. So to see, you know, that he was never fitting any teaching style, you know, because nobody was trying to meet him.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And it's hard. I mean, it's definitely hard in an institution like a public school, or even a private school to some extent, where you have a lot of people and you're scaling things down to meet the most amount of people, which of course won't meet everybody. And there's reasons for that. Yet in our work, as I understand it, we're about meeting people where they are. And so there is that sense of how you're not going to say something that everyone's going to understand and everyone's going to agree with, and that's fine. So what is the pathway to say, okay, you three, I see it, you know, person four, let's, you know, find another way if we can. And
absolutely. And there are many ways, you know, maybe that would be not my first impulse to this step, but, you know, there are many ways. And so when people, they don't learn, let's say, put it in practice, I have to change something. I had to do something. I have to put my hands on their hands. I have to have their hands on me. I have to have them talking. I have to them, you know, and also to be a bit more dynamic, you know. Instead of me talking, and they listen, right?
Yeah, you're bringing them back. You've brought back a memory of being in class with you that I forgot about. I'll share my version of it. If you remember, you might have a different version, but I synthesize very well. I don't follow instructions very well, but I synthesize. And you gave us some practice to do, and I was making it work for me in other ways, and you totally encouraged it.
Yeah,
because you saw that, and there was someone I was working with, and she said to me, I'll work with you, but can you do it just the way the teacher taught it? And that was really hard for me because the way you taught it didn't make sense to me for that person. But yet I had to meet them where they were and sort of give them that real structure, because that's what they believed they needed at that time, and I believed something else, but I had to meet them there. And so I've completely forgot about that until just now. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's true, learning to be humble in a very, proud way. It's also quite a journey and quite challenging, So,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, without hitting it home too much, I think that there's very different, and even when people say, what is Rolfing? I think there's very different approaches and ideas of what it is or how to get there. And I just really resonate with you and how you come to it. And again, partly because you just kind of said it, you have such a lovely, soft easiness to it until a firmness is required. And when that firmness is there, it can be there. And so you have this lovely way, which I find, I don't want to say I find more with Rolf movement people than Rolfers who don't, because even within Rolf movement, it's mixed. But I think that's a bit of what tonic function can point to is that tonic function to me has the science, but it also has a philosophy behind it, which as I start to understand it more, is that what was for you, what were you always that way of being? I'm going to guess no based on what you said before, but I'll just ask that, like, were you always that way of able to adapt more, or was it the Rolfing or other somatic experiencing or others that brought you? Yeah. So
yeah, no, not at all. Really. I mean, that was a journey. So I think that I always wanted to be better, but not better to be the best, but to improve. Let's put it that way. I think improve is the right word. I always wanted to ameliorate. But in the same time, I'm also not scared about making mistakes, and I did so many mistakes. You cannot believe it. Even, for example, when I taught my first 2 classes, I had the same issues, difficult situation with the students on just to the 2 opposites. So, and the theme was boundaries. So the first time I didn't put the boundaries clear enough with the class. And in the second time, because I was afraid that I wasn't putting the boundaries, then I put too tight boundaries,
Yeah.
And so I got, this information. I said, oh, okay, I did experience both. I'm sorry if somebody, was feeling hurted. I did also feel hurted, from some situation in class, but I really learned a big lesson, having clear boundaries. So knowing where I am, knowing my space, knowing my position, knowing my role without, keeping more steadiness, instead of going up and down, keeping more the flow, like the autonomic nervous system, charging, discharging, for example. I've learned after studying AC training, in the AC training, how important it is to have resilience in that nervous system. So that was the beginning. And then, also the very first thing I learned was that, when there is a tiny little elephant in the room, it's better to look at the elephant immediately. Otherwise, the elephant is too big and it will never go out of the room. So any tiny little whatever, friction that was starting has to be acknowledged and discussed and talked and solved, immediately. And it happens all the time. But what I found in the same time was also working on myself, like with other teachers and masters, working on personal development and, doing all different kinds of work, so that I could see my edges and not be, being overloaded by my black spots or dark sides, or being able to see them and face them. And then, so just let go and relax and be who I am, And so actually, the more I was being able to take myself in the way I am, was easier to be more with the people and see them in the way they were, instead of see them through my, let's say, prejudgment or projection, or how you want to call it. I find it super helpful to do the SE training, somatic experiencing training. Very, very, for myself, but also to have an experience. I mean, reading a book or studying something, it's it's food for the brain. But experience that is really has to go through the physiology, through the cells, and then be absorbed by the being, and that was really helpful.
Yeah, we had a few SE people on, and I find it can be very helpful depending on the person. Depending on the person. And not just SE, there are other body-centric practices, but I know in my own experience doing that and doing other practices like that mixed with body work, and then eventually incorporating them together, which I will presume you do as well too.
Yes and no. When I'm doing Rolfing or I'm teaching Rolfing, I'm teaching Rolfing.
Teaching will be different, yeah.
Not teaching SE, but what SE gave to me is to be more attentive and to notice the small elephant, either in myself or in the room or in the others, just to be able to see those shift and changing
Yeah, I don't know if I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but in my phase 2, I remember the teaching assistant's client came in on the first day, and I just said, wow, she looks really angry. And the person next to me was like, what are you talking about? She's lovely, blah, blah, blah. And then on session 5, she got really angry, and everyone was like, oh my God, where did that come from? And I remember thinking, that little elephant for me, with my view, was like very present there. And I think once, whether it's SC or other practices, bring that awareness in, it can become very helpful on the treatment table, because the boundaries of that resilience are more there, and there's a sense that you can work with the person more, and start to also figure out how much input, be it movement wise or touch wise or talk wise, is helpful or repetitive or limiting or whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree with you.
Yeah, but I agree with you that, and this has actually been one of the things I've thought about, is if I ever do start to assist and teach, I probably can't do that, because I think, like you were saying before, it might be too advanced. I think you can kind of talk about it in some way, but some of my sessions we don't touch until I have this theory I'm working with right now, which is that, like, I don't really want to touch someone until that they're rested on the table, because if they're not fully rested, I'm going to be putting input to a system that's already putting input back out, and so sometimes it becomes a purely Rolf movement style guided imagery. Finding how do we find safety in their body so that they can have a non-conceptual idea of safety, but the felt experience, and then kind of pointing it back to them as, do you notice this now? Do you notice this now? Can you see these changes slowly, not as quick as I just said it? And that's really wonderful. And that in my experience, helps the work land more, because the container of agency is more palpable for them. But in a classroom where you're trying to kind of give the basics, that may get in the way. It could be helpful if you're doing a 13 series in the basic training where you have the Rolf movement sessions. So then you could say, hey, let's pad these in for this reason to teach the students. But what I tell my clients, or what I've been starting to tell them is, remember, when you come to see me, this is a very artificial thing. we're coming to a false environment of the treatment room to do these things to put you back in the real world, right? And the classroom is very similar. The classroom is a construct, a laboratory to create an environment for people to learn something, but it's not necessarily the real way things would go, because we're trying to, generally when you teach, there's too many possibilities. I mean, one of the best things I learned, which I hated at the time in my Rolf training, was by Michael Pollan. He answered everything with maybe or depends. And I hated it at that time. I hated it because I was so linear and needed that. But the fact of the matter is, you have no real clue where things are going to go. You have a general idea. And if you're going to be teaching this wide, vast thing in 2 weeks, 2 months, you need to simplify. You need to cut things out. So for me, it's actually really helpful to have this talk, even though it's meant for other people, because it's informing me more of how to approach this possibility.
Yeah. And you know what? When I teach a phase 2 class, so really when the students, they start to learn about the 10 sessions, I've noticed that, I mean, we know that things can be very complex, and it could be like depends or maybe, but actually we need to build from the beginning. So we need to start simple. We need to have simple, clear things that people can try, apply, practice, or investigate. And then from simplicity, we can build complexity. So if we start to bring the whole dish, in the same moment, then it's too complicated. And with the need to be holistic, in the more holistic meaning of the word, we are dispersing, diffusing every dish that you want to add. This is what happened, because everything loses shape and form. So, for example, I see sometimes people, when they do body reading on session number 1, they see everything. They see this and that, and the contralateral movement, and this, and see a little holding here, a little holding there. Yes, but what about the breath?
Yeah.
So simple, Session 1 is about the breath. So I don't want to be simplistic, but also with the fears not to be holistic enough, then we tend to be too vague at some point.
And you lose it. Yeah, I mean, it's so obvious. It's so obvious, and yet I needed to hear it this way to understand it in this way, because for me, I've one of my concerns with teaching is there's so much. How do you simplify it? I don't want to simplify because I'll be missing something. But really, like the acceptance of course, of course, it's even similar to what I was saying before, and I'm just hearing it in another way now. Like, of course, you're going to miss something but you're gonna get the very best you can do with what you have, and get that going. I'm thinking almost of like making a sourdough. You don't make the bread. You just get this very, very simple yeast and stuff, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It itself will become bread, and then you'll make another bread from that, and it keeps becoming a better and better bread.
Exactly. We do sourdough. We don't do yeast.
Yeah.
The chemical yeast. We do sourdough, and the more you use it, the better it becomes. But you repeat on and on and on the same things, but it's never the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And to me, it's too advanced.
Yeah. It's lovely. I hope that other people get something out of this besides just me, but if not, I'm loving it. Because you did Rolf Movement first in 84, I think you said, 83, 84, and then later you got introduced to tonic function. Did that change things radically for you?
Absolutely. So the first time I started with the Pierpaola was in a workshop in Italy. I think it was in 1994, something like that, around that time. And there was surprising. So, for example, I never heard that we have two directions, There was always, the plumb line, and the plumb line goes down. So gravity brings us down. So I never thought about, there is also the sun attracting us. So there is also the other direction, and one cannot exist without the other. And that was really, wow, opening windows, opening insights. In the same time, was making things much more complex, And it's like when you start to review everything you have been doing, and then review, and then say, well, what's the way to do it? What's right to do it? What did I do before? And but in the same time, the work with Hubert was again, was creating this embodiment experience. So it wasn't not just cognitive. I mean, I remember he was giving us tons of articles to read, super, interesting, difficult, take time to understand what was written there. So a lot of, studying, cortical studying, but a lot of, in the same time, a lot of embodiment. Because all the notion, all the theory, they had to have a reality in the body. And I still remember one exercise that he was doing with me, and I was, resting at the wall. And there was about push and reach, from the hand. And then, he said, okay, now push to me. And then I did it my way, which was to go to him. And he said, no, don't come with me. And I was like shocking and freezing. What do you mean, don't come with me? Oh, and then all the other, stories about me, like, oh, he doesn't want me, or he doesn't like me, all these things of being accepted. He said, no, we need to be two to have a relationship. So we need to be two to have a relationship. So find your body, and then you can come to me and push. That was so deep, And all the story, with the boundaries and being, easy in my body. And I mean, it was really a realization, that if I want to have a relationship with the other, I need to feel first myself, not be lost in the other, not be push myself away, but I need to be in my tonic function, using my tonic function in my best way. That was a lesson I think I will never forget. And,
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and it's same, when I'm teaching, I cannot be out there or inside myself. I need to feel myself in order to have a relationship with all the students, which are part of it. You were creating a group, which is the group, and I'm part of the group with different roles, of course.
Yeah, I remember being in a class with Karen McCo's assisting, and what you're saying, I remember observing that with her, the way that she held space for the group with her, for lack of a better word, with her body, and the expandable and contractedness, similar like you did it, that this is just a bigger class. And so it was more palpable to observe it. And it was also a bit of a chaotic class. So instead of watching that, and then also sneak peeking in like breaks and noticing how she would retreat to take breaks to self-care to nourish that, because it's a lot of effort. I mean, it's how I hold my practice similarly, probably not as refined, and it's a lot of effort. It was easier to just push tissue, and not really be in my body and just push and look onto others. It's a lot more effort, maybe not effort, but there's a different energetic, caloric calorie involved, where it can be a lot more tired, maybe not tiring, but there's a different effort in there.
Yep.
And one of the things that I found of tonic function, and I'm still trying to, I believe I get it, but I want to get it more. There's more to get. I think I relatively embody it, but I want to understand more from the cortical, because I understand that the more cortical I can get in balance, the more embodied I can get, and vice versa. There's an interplay. It's not about being in one versus the other, but the two can inform each other. And so I'm trying to still get more, because I find it so rich. But one of the things I sometimes would say is that or maybe I heard this even, that tonic function gave a language to Rolf movement.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Because also, everything that we explore with the movement, it could be limited or contained into the experience of the movement in itself. And this is wonderful, so you discover what you're holding, what does it mean, and how does it feel, and if there is a memory, et cetera, et cetera. But then, when you include gravity, and that means, that you include tonic function. So when you include gravity, and it could be even lying down, gravity, it could be sitting, it could be standing. But when you start to feel, how you behave on the planet, and how this is also affecting the way you behave with others, then it takes a bigger challenge also, So, and also, but in the same time, it becomes more, what we say, the everyday life action. Or when I train in my movement training, we used to talk about the major holding pattern. And the major holding pattern, we're doing a lot of movement analysis and function and manipulation work, on the joints. I started with Annie Doug and Jenny French, and we're doing a lot of also hands-on work on the joints. So movement analysis or feeling through the hands where were the major holding patterns, and then having the person being aware of the patterns. But we never really talk about being in gravity or sensing that there is a ground here and there is an upward direction there. And in the way I'm having a tone, it depends on many factors. So the holding could be due to physical restriction, but it could be due to mental restriction or to emotional restrictions or to whatever. And so the idea to sense how is, in verticality and how do I behave when I stand, when I walk, it really made a big difference.
Yeah, and I think in addition to up and down, or how are we interacting in that plane, but it's also how are we interacting as we move through the world, because that that forward and back is going to be a part of that too, that we're interacting with, and how do we I don't have a lot of the tonic function lingo down, but I think how do you reach into the world, and how does the world reach or push back into you, and how are we swimming through this? We don't, just like fish don't see the water supposedly, right? We don't see the space around us. We just kind of exist in it, depending on our kinesphere. And so bringing that in and seeing, how is Pierpaola stepping into the world, and from where is that stepping in coming from and not coming from?
Yeah. So then the concept of lesion and inhibition. So I can move my arm, I have no lesion in my arm, but maybe I'm inhibited in moving my arm. I don't really trust that space, or I don't allow myself to be in that space. So as you say, the outside also has a reality which is either attracting us as much as what we feel inside. And I think it was one of the Hubert Goddard definition about the exproprioception, for example. So we have a proprioception, which is how do we perceive ourselves from inside. How is the exproprioception? He meant to be how the outside environment is acting on our inner reality, which is also interesting. So the way you look at me, the way you talk to me, it can either facilitate or prevent.
Yeah, and I think one of the things
anger.
Yeah. One of the things I found interesting was it's so simple, but it changes. So many of my clients struggle with it. My dad still can't do this to the day, which is when you touch someone, there's the afferent and the efferent. So, if we were in the same room and I touched you, I could feel you, but I could also be felt by you. And playing into that both ways. And I'd say the same thing of being seen and being it has a similar connotation of the inward outward. And some people struggle with one or the other, which is also information about nervous system, about ontological frameworks. But even in just playing that, for some people, even when they feel safe and you have a little hand on, and then you say, you feel my hand, right? And can you feel the other way, whichever way you're isn't? For some, that's way too much and it shuts them down. But for some, it's almost like the whole body shifts and something in them just completely changes. And all of a sudden their relation with the world, the way that they're walking, the way they're going through the world is different. It's interesting.
Yeah, you made me remember that, for example, when we teach the touch, the first moment when we teach touch in Europe, we call it level 1 at the moment. So one of the very first exercises we do, it's about feeling the position where you are, like being too close and too merging and melting with the client, or too distant, with the client. And both are bad, because you're either too close or too distant. And then the right one is when you are, like in this 8-shaped motion. So there's you, there's the client, and then you flow through all the dialogue flows, et cetera, et cetera. But to me, again, this would be a little bit too simplistic, because for some people, you need to have more space.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe people who have been abused, for example, or people who, whatever, so they need to have more space. So I can have more distance from my client, but being present. So sensing, my tonic function, for example, or other people, they need to be more contained. So I need to merge more. I need to, be closer, even, and on an energetic level. But again, I'm not melting with them. I'm just closer, But I don't get lost in them. I know where I am. So again, this ideal of, being, that's you and me and the gravity flow, blah, blah, blah. It's an example, but it's also part of the reality. So what's important is to, again, feel where I am. So where am I? Which is, how do I?
Well, as you, sorry to interrupt, as you feel where you are, you also feel where you are not.
Yes.
So where you are not, to some extent, is maybe the client, or I forget if I shared this on a previous talk, but I had a client last month who was a mental health worker. So we were able to kind of talk about some similar aspects of safety as a felt experience. And I was working on him, and I just kind of got off, and I went to one side, and then I went to the other side, and I asked him, what are you noticing as I'm here and as I'm here? And he picked up on it because I was feeling it. He said, it feels like my nervous system is tracking you. And I was like, exactly. And then I couldn't really get in more, because there was some part of him that was trying to understand what was happening. There was a safety mechanism involved in that. So I couldn't get closer. I mean, I could go closer and do whatever I needed to do, for sure, but I'd be meeting this resistance in him that I would say ultimately would be doing more damage. But by naming it, by just having him notice it, and he named it, not me naming it for him, that barrier started to shift, and I was able to come closer and be welcome in, and where I ended now could go further in, because there was a shift. And like you said, the pink elephant was named, and all of a sudden it kind of disappeared.
Yeah, exactly. But I imagine that you were feeling in your body. So your tonic function was reacting in a certain way that if you were too close, probably you would have felt too tense or too collapsed.
Yeah. The way it's exactly, there's some sort of give or take, some resistance or not. And I do my best to not go to cortical and make sense of it, because I find that really useless. Afterwards I can, but in the moment, just sort of say, okay, and really let the body as a compass sort of organize, well, what's needed here. Yeah.
Right. And so to come back to what we were talking before about the SC work. So to me, that was helping me to be more prompt to feel when something was shifting in myself. So either a sense of collapse, I don't need to collapse down to the floor. I don't need to feel super tight, but I was more able to feel the tiny degrees of change. And then realizing, okay, what's going on here?
Yeah, and those tiny degrees are tiny, but foundational in ways, because,
and significant.
Yeah, very significant. Yeah.
So it's not about talk about the trauma and how to solve the trauma in a session, but it's really different, using the tools of recognizing the variation of the nervous system, basically.
Yeah, for sure. And whether that is a felt, as we're working on them, felt, or felt from a distance, to me, it's very similar. And this is sort of what I was saying at the beginning of, until the person gets on the table, and there's a feeling of resistance. And until that is, we're partly going into that. Trauma is such a big word, but I'll use it for here. But we're going into that resistance from whatever learned experience is no longer serving in this regard, and so it isn't really useful, except for a mental story of, oh, he's touching me or he's doing this, and that's great. And there's definitely value for that. What I've found, and this is maybe something for me to work on, is when I get those clients who I'm not able to transpose, who only want that touch, and I'm not able, for whatever reason, to get them across that barrier into, well, that's great. Wouldn't you like to learn a little bit more as to the reasons? I've become more okay with not working with them. There's a part of me that wants to help everybody, and I can't, and I conceptually get that, but there's an insecurity or whatnot in me that I feel, even just sharing it. But I'm becoming more okay with recognizing, as well as, like, even though I think these work and I see these work, like, it's not for everyone right now. I believe it's for everyone. It just might not be for them at this time. And getting better at being okay. Yeah.
This tendency to help everybody, it's both. Again, it's both. It's an aim, So it's like our task, in life, but it's also it could be a trap,
Yeah.
So I believe that healing starts from inside, and cure can come from outside. So I like to think that we are healer, somatic healer.
What I'm thinking at this point, or maybe more wondering, is, we've been about an hour, which is great. I have a sense that we could talk more, which is also great. But I'm noticing a part of me, I appreciate you so much, and I'm like, I want to harvest all of that data while I can, while also recognizing another part of me that's like thinking of the listeners as well, but myself, because I can feel myself right here saying, oh, I'm probably at a good full, or not full, but like enough of, I could have that extra cookie, but I don't need it. I want it, but I don't need it.
No, me too. I mean, if I'm listening, I feel pretty full.
Yeah. There's a lot we've done, but it does also feel in the Rolfing lingo that, we're getting to a good place of closure for now. But I've really enjoyed this dialogue. It's been very helpful for me personally, but I also just really enjoy, you. And one of the things I love about this podcast that I do for fun is sharing people or theories that have had an impact on my life with others. And so I'm really looking, there's a part of me that wants to like skip the ones I'm still editing that are in queue and be like, no, let's get Pierpaola's out there first. I won't do that. But I'm really excited to share you more, because I think some Rolfers, this isn't just Rolfers listening, but some Rolfers do know who you are, but not all do. And I'm hoping that some who haven't heard of you or have read the name in this class coming up will get something out of this and say, oh, I want to go to that class in August that she's teaching. And I want to go to that class in August. I'm not sure with my schedule be able to, but I mean, that's something I really recommend for people who are listening. So I hope that does. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope so too, because also it's interesting to teach other non-European, non-Italian, so the difference. And I want to say you that I really like your generosity and your enthusiasm, to make things happen. I want to thank you.
Thanks. It's a boundary with that too. It's something I continue to have to work with of too much and not enough. And it's a continual process, but thank you. It's nice I'll say thank you, and I'll say I'll message you later because I can already feel I haven't fully digested it. It'll take some time to fully, so I'll send a message to you privately later. But for now, I'll say thank you, and a more rich thank you will come later.
Thanks for listening to us at Touching into Presence. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. You can find out more about Pierpaola at volpones.it. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd appreciate if you leave a positive review of the podcast and subscribe to it through the platform of your choice. When you do this, it really helps other people find us, and we greatly appreciate your support. We look forward to hearing back from you and seeing you on our next conversation at Touching into Presence. Bye for now.